to do that, but he did. And we have a right to the tree of life. And we give him all the praise, all the honor, and all the glory.
The New Living Translation. And what's unorthodox about this is I'm going to read the whole book. And therefore, you may be seated. Habakkuk, chapter 1. We will read through chapter 3. Short book. This is the message that the prophet Habakkuk received in a vision. How long, O Lord, must I call for help? But you do not listen. Violence is everywhere. I cry, but you do not come to save. Must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all this misery? Wherever I look, I see destruction and violence. I am surrounded by people who love to argue and fight. The law has become paralyzed, and there is no justice in the courts. The wicked far outnumber the righteous, so that justice has become perverted. The Lord replied, look around at the nations. Look and be amazed. For I am doing something in your own day. Something you wouldn't believe even if someone told you about it. I am raising up Babylonians, a cruel and violent people. They will march across the world and conquer other lands. They are notorious for their cruelty and do whatever they like. Their horses are swifter than cheetahs and fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their charioteers charge far away. Like eagles, they swoop down to devour their prey. Oh, they come all bent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind, sweeping captives ahead of them like sand. They scoff at kings and princes and scorn all their fortresses. They simply pile ramps of earth against their walls and capture them. They sweep past like the wind and are gone, but they are deeply guilty, for their own strength is their God. Habakkuk, O Lord, my God, my Holy One, you who are eternal, surely you do not plan to wipe us out, O Lord, our rock. You have sent these Babylonians to correct us, to punish us for our many sins. But you are pure and cannot stand the sight of evil. Will you wink at their treachery? Should you be silent while the wicked swallow up people more righteous than they? Are we only fish to be caught and killed? Or we only see creatures that have no leaders? Must we be strung up on their hooks and caught in their nets while they rejoice and celebrate? Then they will worship their nets and burn incense in front of them. These nets are the gods who have made us rich, they will claim. Will you let them get away with this forever? Will they succeed forever in their heartless conquest? Then Habakkuk goes on to say in chapter 2, I will climb up to my watchtower and stand at my guard posts. There I will wait to see what the Lord says and how he will answer my complaint. Then the Lord said to me, write my answer plainly on tablets, so that a runner can carry the correct message to others. This vision is for a future time. It describes the end, and it will be fulfilled. If it seems slow in coming, wait patiently, for it will surely take place. It will not be delayed. Look at the proud. They trust in themselves, and their lives are crooked. But the righteous will live by their faithfulness to God. He goes on to say that wealth, the Lord speaking, wealth is treacherous, and the arrogant are never at rest. They open their mouth as wide as the grave, and like death, they are never satisfied. In their greed, they have gathered up in their greed, they have gathered up many nations and swallowed many people. But soon their captors will taunt them. They will mock them, saying, what sorrow awaits you, thieves? Now you will get what you deserve. You became rich by extortion, but how much longer can this go on? Suddenly, your debtors will take action. They will turn on you and take all you have, while you stand trembling and helpless. Because you have plundered many nations. Now, all the survivors will plunder you. You committed murder throughout the countryside and filled the towns with violence. What sorrow awaits you, who build big houses with money gained dishonestly? You believe your wealth will buy you security, putting your family nest beyond the reach of danger. But by the murders you committed, you have shamed your name and forfeited your lives. The very stone in the wall cry out against you, and the beams in the ceiling echo the complaint. What sorrow awaits you, who build cities and money gained through murder and corruption? Has not the Lord of heaven armies promised that the wealth of the nation will turn to ashes? They worked so hard, but all in vain. For as the waters fill the sea, the earth will be filled with an awareness of the glory of the Lord. What sorrow awaits you who makes your neighbors drunk? You force your cup on them so you can gloat over your shameful nakedness. But soon it will be your turn to be disgraced. Come, drink and be exposed. Drink from the cup of the Lord's judgment, and all your glory will be turned to shame. You cut down the forest of Lebanon, now you will be cut down. You destroyed the wild animals, so now that terror will be yours. You committed murder throughout the courtyards and filled the town with violence. What good is an idol carved by man, or a cast image that deceives you? How foolish to trust in your own creation, a God that can't speak. What sorrow awaits you who say to wooden idols, wake up and save us? To speechless store images you say, rise up and teach us. Can an idol tell you what to do? They may be overlaid with gold and silver, but they are lifeless inside. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. And then we come to Habakkuk's prayer. After the Lord has responded to his questions and his complaint. And this prayer, verse 1, this prayer was sung by the prophet Habakkuk. I have heard all about you, Lord. I am filled with awe by your amazing work. In this time of our deep need, help us again, as you did in years gone by. And in your anger, remember your mercy. I see God moving across the desert from Edom, the Holy One coming from Mount Paran. His brilliant splendor fills the heavens, and the earth is filled with his praise. His coming is as brilliant as the sunrise. Rays of light flash from his hand, where his awesome power is hidden. Pestilence marches before him. Plagues follow close behind. When he stops, the earth shakes. When he looks, the nations tremble. He shatters everlasting mountains and levels the eternal hills. He is the eternal one. I see the people of Cush in distress, and the nation of Midian trembling in terror. Was it in anger, Lord, that you struck the rivers and parted the sea? Were you displeased with them? No, you were sending your chariots of salvation. You banish your bow and your quiver of and your quiver of arrows. You split open the earth with flowing rivers. The mountains watch and tremble. Onward swept the raging waters. The mighty deep cried out, lifting his hand in submission. The sun and moon stood still in the sky as your brilliant arrows flew and your glittering spear flashed. You marched across the land in anger and trampled the nations in your fury. You went out to rescue your chosen people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the heads of the wicked and stripped their bones from head to toe. With his own weapon, you destroyed the chief of those who rush out like a whirlwind, thinking Israel would be an easy prey. You trampled the sea with your horses, and the mighty waters piled high. I trembled inside when I heard this. My lips quivered with fear. My legs gave way beneath me, and I shook in terror. I will wait quietly for the coming day when disaster will strike the people who invade us. Even though the fig trees have no blossom and there are no grapes on the vine, even though the olive crop fails and the fields is empty and barren, even though the flock die in the fields and the cattle barns are empty, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in the God of my salvation. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer, able to tread upon the heights. This little book of Habakkuk, I invite all of you to go and read it, pray over it, and read it for yourself. You see, as I condense my thoughts after you have heard what the Lord's word had to say, Habakkuk, like many of us, is wrestling with the crisis of our day. You see, when Habakkuk raised his first question to the Lord, it was a question about the violence, the plundering, the oppression that he witnessed around him. And the witnessing that he was speaking of was concerning the people of God. And so he could not understand in his own limited way, according to his own foundational understanding of his faith, why would a just God use an unjust people to correct a people considered more righteous than they? He couldn't understand it. But the first point that I had to wrestle with, that I want to share with you, a very simple point. It's all right to question God. You see, that's what Habakkuk did. He questioned God. And he questioned God because he didn't understand all of what he'd been told, all of what he had been taught, his tradition, his mores, the norms of his day suggested and implied to him that his God would not allow for such a thing as that. And you know, the truth of it is, in our day, we've witnessed the abandonment of traditions, norms, mores. We witnessed the desecration of even sacred things. To the point that it has created a crisis in our midst. And like Habakkuk, what we really have to wrestle with is that it's really a crisis of faith. And so his question was very important and invaluable. Because if he had not asked the question, he'd have been stuck in his mess. Trying to act out of faith that don't work. Because the truth of it is, we can't order God around. We don't make God. God made us. And so it was a good thing for him to question God. You remember Job questioned God. And because he questioned God, he didn't get stuck in his own conclusion. And you know, really, the truth of the matter is, because of the trampling of truth, because of the changes with abandoning traditions and norms and mores, because of the lying and the deception, because of the greed and the corruption, we now is experiencing the ground under which we're standing shifting. And whenever the grounds begin to shift, it causes a crisis in our understanding. This is the reason why theologians have often said that faith is really about seeking understanding. Because the truth of it is, we can never put a period on God. And this is what Habakkuk really had to wrestle with in terms of his question. Because he really had put a period on God. Surely God wouldn't do nothing like that. And so we see here in Habakkuk that it's all right to question. And I will submit to you that we need to, in our own personal relationship, because I can only share with you what the Spirit gave me as it dealt with me. And it has caused me to understand that even in terms of my own faith, in terms of my own witness and testimony, that there's some things that I don't understand about what God is doing. In fact, when I look around at our day, I could see how I could have easily got caught up in my own dangerous conclusions. You see, because when I look at Habakkuk, I see what Habakkuk saw. In fact, it would be like saying today, God, I know you see those on our street corners, begging, homeless and without. God, I know you see the partiality of the application of the law and its dehumanizing and destructive impact on the humanity and dignity of certain groups of people. God, I know you saw what happened down there in Uvalde, Texas. How the innocent of the most innocent was snuffed out. And the deplorable, disgusting, gross hypocrisy of the stewards who claimed to protect and serve. Even, oh God, how our nation, who in the past have made the claim to be your people, and a nations of laws make mockery of law, desecrate what might be considered sacred, slaughter truth and trample all over it. Therefore, we too, oh God, are tempted to say that the law is powerless and justice never goes forth. Because those who may be righteous is powerless due to overwhelming wickedness surrounding them. Too often I hear this kind of implied response out of a sense of hopelessness. But we, like Habakkuk, must personally raise the question for ourselves, lest we get stuck in a very dangerous conclusion. Dangerous because such conclusion easily leads to anything goes. Nothing really matters, and meaning have been stripped of meaning. When we find ourselves approaching that space, all that had come before, undergirding our faith as we understand it and how it informed our behavior, will cry out to God. But we must know that we can always go to God and question God in sincerity about that which get in our way of trusting God. Oh, you don't hear me. I told Reverend Barry I'm a good learner and a good steward of what I've been entrusted with, so I will not encroach upon the time. And so I'll reserve my third point for later on. As I hang around here too long, the second thing I invite us to consider reflecting on Habakkuk is that when we question God and when God answers, the well-being of our soul and the centrality of our faith is at the heart of God's response. You see, that's why I had to read the whole thing. I just couldn't lift up a verse or several verses. You needed to hear the whole thing. Because whenever we go to God in sincerity, out of a sincere heart and conscience, we can bank on God having a response for us. Now, I may not fully understand the response even when he gives it to me at that appointed time. But he's already told me, wait on it. And he's given me enough to wait. You see, when we hear Habakkuk pray, and he gets toward the close of that prayer, he talks about being like a deer standing on the high place. But the reason why he was saying that, because of God's answer to him had empowered him. Even though he didn't understand it all, it was all he needed to continue to run on. Matter of fact, when God tells him to write the vision and make it plain, make it bold enough so that anybody running along with you can see what you're talking about, can understand where you're coming from. Because they too are in the same muck and mire that you in. And they know that God has already given them an answer. Because God has been good to them. God has blessed them. God has raised up Christ in their heart and in their consciousness. And they understand, though I don't understand it all. I know that God is true to God's word. And I'm going to stand on my guidepost. I'm going to stand on my watch post and wait and continue to wait until I come to fully understand what God has already given. What he's already given. And what he's already promised. A promise from a God that cannot lie. And so, my brothers and sisters, even as we witnessed this past week, the frightening, earth-shaking revelations that came before us, we got a God that don't leave us in the dark. We got a God that when even the media get it wrong, we can go to God and ask, Lord, what's going on? Why are you allowing such and such? And God will answer. So I don't know how you're dealing with your crisis. You're lying if you say you don't have one. Because each of one of us is going to experience, like Job, like Peter, like Paul, a crisis of faith. And when we do, that Holy Spirit that God has anchored us in will keep us in the path. But the thing about it, you'll know that it's not you keeping you, but it's the Spirit of God in you that God has raised up in your heart and in your mind. And so you don't never get to the place of having the conclusion that love don't matter, that truth don't matter, that kindness don't matter, that compassion don't matter, that mercy don't matter. In spite of what's going on, we are the life that God has placed in this world, a life of what it means to be life-giving. And this is why the topic, the just shall live by faith. Because each one of us is here, not because we don't have faith, but because we have it. But you must wrestle. You must struggle. You must suffer for the faith you have. But you can hold on because what God already gave you. Whether it's sickness or disease, whether it's a threat that some foolish, wicked person without an understanding of God is throwing you away, you can hold on. Because God is your anchor. God is your strength and your strong tower. Oh, you got a place for refuge. And y'all raised the question why we come to church. That's one of the reasons why we come to church. That we can be reminded of the anchor God has established. Not simply in this house, but in this house. So we come to that point that the doors of the church are open. Oh, it's open. And I hear the Spirit saying, come.